So we are going to go over this 1-1 assignment to review section 1. And so the first thing that we're going to look at are the key features of this graph and decide whether or not these statements are true. The first one is referencing domain, and it's saying that it's negative infinity to 4. Now keep in mind, domain measures all of our x values, and so we look left to right. And since this parabola here has an arrow going to the left and an arrow going to the right, and it's getting wider, that means it's going to continue forever off to negative infinity over on the left and forever off to positive infinity on the right. So that would mean that our domain is not negative infinity to 4. We would write that negative infinity to infinity, or sometimes students will say all real numbers. The next one is talking about the range, and the range we looked bottom to top. And so again, these arrows are showing that we're going down forever, so that is negative infinity, all the way up to our highest point, which is 4. That would be yes. Notice that there's a square bracket there. That means we do include 4 because this function does cross right through it. The next piece is talking about positive or negative. And so in class we talked about positive being wherever our graph is above the x-axis. And so the hard part here is once you've identified where y is positive, we write our answers using x values. And these x values would be from -3 to a +1 is where it's positive. And so no, that interval is not true. It should be -3 to 1. And notice that at -3 and at 1 that my y value is 0, which is not positive or negative. And so we're not going to include either -3 or 1. We're going to use round parentheses there. The last one is referencing where the graph is decreasing. And so that would be that right side of the graph. Notice that at the top is when it's not increasing or decreasing. That's when x is -1, and then it just decreases forever after that. And so the graph is decreasing from -1 to infinity. That one is true. Moving down to number 2, we are looking at an error analysis, and it's asking what error did Damien make when defining the domain of the graph. And so the domain stated was all real numbers. But remember that open dots mean that we do not want to equal that value there. And so all real numbers means every value is included, but we see that -3 should be excluded. And so how we would want to write that domain is negative infinity to 3. We can't equal negative infinity, and we don't want to equal 3. That handles this red portion of the graph, but then the blue portion would be from 3 to infinity. All right, so now to just kind of summarize all of the key features, I would recommend that you get some practice on your own and maybe try part A on your own by pausing this video, and then you can watch to check your answers. B is going to be a little bit more of a challenge, and you can just see that on the graph. And so if you feel like you're up for the challenge, do B as well. But to get the necessities out of this lesson, just make sure that you can successfully do number 1. So domain here, looking all the way to the left, would be -3, and then all the way to the right would be a +5. And I'm going to use a square bracket on both since we have closed dots. Range, looking bottom to top, we see our lowest value is 4, all the way up to 3. Again, our function crosses right through, so I'm going to use square brackets. Okay, so next we are going to talk about positive and negative. Again, that is above the x-axis where I've highlighted. And so it is positive. It looks about to be at 1.5 all the way to 5. And I don't include either because there's 0 on those ends. That means that it's negative everywhere else below the x-axis, and so that is from -3 to 1.5, again not including either. It is increasing in this middle section here. That's from positive 1 to positive 2. And then we're decreasing in 2 locations, over here off to the left, and then on the other end on the right. So it is decreasing when x is negative 3 to 1, and when x is 2 to 5. All right, so real quick, I did notice that I didn't have that negative in front of the 4, so just be mindful of that. That range was negative 4 to positive 3. And then again, I mentioned that B was a little bit more of a challenging type problem, and so if you want to stop watching now, that is completely okay. But here in a second, I am going to go ahead and post these answers. So if you want to see how you did with B, this would be a good time to check yourself. So you can see how you did on part B. Where it did get a little bit confusing is with positive and negative because of this open circle and closed dot, and where it switches, there's this little tiny gap between this open circle and right here where it goes from negative to positive. And so that made this region a little bit more confusing, but if you felt good about the majority of the video, then you should be pretty well set for section 1-1.